if you thought about like, what do you think the industry looks like in the 2030 timeframe, which wasn't that far away, it's only 5 years away. Chalan, I am so excited to kind of chat with you. It's been really so long. Like we got to kind of like talk in passing at the summit in Dallas, like during the cocktail reception,
Right.
but it wasn't enough. So I'm really excited that we have a block of time to talk. So how you doing?
Doing well. Great to be here. I always enjoy our conversations,
Yeah.
and I appreciated where you've taken our market and our sort of technology group forward. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, the community is growing a lot. Knock on wood, and
Mhm.
we have a really, I think, the best kind of pack content that we've ever had for Summit coming up in late October, which you're going to be a part of. You're doing one of the keynotes, in the early afternoon. So excited about that, and excited to really host everybody, as well. But
Yes.
so I know about you, but I don't think I don't. But I want to make sure everybody does. So
Yeah.
why don't we spend a little bit of time, talking about, your career trajectory and your journey, and kind of what brought you here today.
Indeed. Indeed. It's I every time I get this question, I look back and say, when did this all start? And
Hmm.
it really started in grad school. And you might say, well, really that far away?
Uh,
But I worked on basically what was called back then real-time traffic over packet networks. That turned out to be voice and video over IP, all the stuff that we use, in fact, what we're using right now to record this session. And if you look at it from how that evolved, it's really about applications over networks. There are some networking people that say, I want to move the packets. I have focused on what am I carrying on those and why does that make sense? What does that need for the end user or the enterprise, so on and so forth. So I've applied that first as a technical person, then a business strategy technical person. I started at IBM, worked at Polycom, voice and video over IP, Cisco, and then at Citrix, which is more applications over essentially networks.
yeah.
And what I've learned in all those years is customers really don't care what's happening underneath,
Mm,
especially these days.
yeah.
I call it the DoorDash effect. They don't care where you got the ingredients from as long as they're good quality. They just want the ultimate experience of having a nice meal, right? Um, so that's what I've learned over time. And say apps need to work, data needs to move fast, they need to know what's happening with observability and visibility, and ideally they don't have to have a PhD or rocket science degree to do all of it, right? They want
Mm.
simplicity. So that's been my career journey, and the last few years has been focused on simplicity side because things have
Mm.
just gotten too complicated, and we have to make them easier to use so that we can use them across the board.
Yeah, that's one. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know that you worked at Cisco. I think
Yep.
the one before Riverbed, I think we were talking when you were at Citrix.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
it was so funny. I remember the first meeting that I met you with, and so I come to the meeting, and you look at me and you're like, "So you're the one who's created all this chaos." I'm like,
I probably said
I'm
that.
like, oh. I hope it's a
Well,
good chaos.
I think it was at the theater in New York. I forgot, I forgot the name of the theater. It was a small theater that you had your first ODUG event, and oh my
Yeah,
God, I said, this is it. This is starting something, and look at what it's become. So amazing, amazing.
yeah. Well, awesome. Well, I took that to heart. So let's kind of dive in a little bit. So you were mentioning kind of observability and kind of
Mhm,
simplification.
mhm.
Um, Clearly, we've been all focusing around, where do we kind of apply AI and where do we get the best return? And I think for infrastructure professionals, everyone's looking at operations. And
Yep.
so maybe, how is AI changing maybe the way enterprises are approaching both observability and then also gaining insight into performance visibility? So So let's kind of maybe think about just those two areas, kind of
Yeah.
performance and then observability.
I mean, I call that, call it AI for networking of sorts, and simply put, but essentially, um, like like most of the audience, I'm sure knows, we've never had a dearth of data on what's happening in a network. We have
Yeah,
probes, we have collectors, taps, agents, so we're swimming in data. What was not easy, or is how do you know what is happening with all of that data?
yeah,
How do you find the problems, or called the needle in the haystack?
yeah,
And then, amongst the thousands of things that could go wrong, how do you identify the more relevant symptoms and causes? And then how do you go fix it? I mean, all of that is called network operations in a nutshell. But we have hundreds of people in every company trying to do that in manually, and it has really been more of a manual process. I mean, apart from data collection, it's been more of a manual process requiring, you know, the experience and intelligence of a networking professional. What observability has evolved into, and we're one of the biggest players in that space as Riverbed, is that it is not just changed how we collect the data, but also how we again analyze it in a way to find that needle in the haystack,
yeah,
and then find the right possible smaller set of causes that could be driving those issues, and then ideally using API driven tools to find ways to automate the remediation of that problem, right?
yeah,
And some of these are simple problems, like a lot of people have Wi-Fi issues. A lot of people have Teams call, like Teams, WebEx, you name it, Zoom call issues, and myriad of endpoint issues that people deal with, and all those have been one relatively expensive IT calls. Two, you still need someone to go with to diagnose it across the system, and AI is really changing how that's done. AI is practically replacing the level one support engineer.
yeah,
In many cases, replacing the level two support engineer, or at least augmenting their skills to be able to um, understand the fix. And often it just allows that person to maybe just authorize a change rather than going and implementing the change in the network, in the endpoint, so on and so forth. So huge productivity gain, a big change in how AI has allowed for, again, finding that underlying cause without having to go through clipboard and log file examination, so on and so forth. So it is a game changer,
yeah,
and it helps with, again, fixing IT issues, fixing performance issues, and I don't think there's a single vendor in the market that hasn't used AI. Then it becomes a matter of
yeah,
how do you implement that AI in a way that is secure, because you collect it, you have all this data. I mean, you have massive amounts of data that you've collected across people's laptops, their mobile devices, their servers, their their network,
yeah,
their cloud instances, so on and so forth. So anything that contaminates that, or anything that leaks from there to the AI system itself, those are big risks for an enterprise. So AI is helping automation, helping speed to resolution. At the same time, you have to be careful in how you implement it, because you don't want to be leaking your enterprise's cloud crown jewels in via this backdoor called AI. If you don't have the proper models, the proper governance
yeah,
around all of that. So AI, very powerful as a tool, but has to be implemented in a way that understands the enterprise's security concerns, confidentiality concerns, and even for example, how much a normal, let's say, agent on a laptop may track certain behavior, but AI may make other determinations from that. So you have to be careful as to what you're determining from that behavior also. So
yeah.
there's huge pluses, but it has to be really a curated way to implement that AI in a way that aligns with enterprises, governance responsibilities and HR responsibilities, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So one, thank you, for that. Totally agree, especially on the security part of that, and then kind of the whole haystack, model and how
Yeah,
we're kind of trying to change that.
yeah,
Two, actually, it kind of two questions kind of come up. First is that we know that the amount of traffic moving around networks continues to increase, right? So
Yeah.
like I think the last time we looked at it within the ONU community, I'd say like the vast majority of these corporations, like in the Fortune 500 and above,
Mhm.
are running about petabyte worth of data. And that time frame, that's either a few hours or it could be like over a day or two.
Yeah.
I forget. eBay gave us some numbers. FedEx also had some numbers as well. I think FedEx is like a petabyte, like almost every few hours.
Yeah.
So it would be really interesting to kind of understand the correlation between traffic flowing and then also as traffic increases, how much do the emitters increase as well? So that's all the log data, the alerts, the alarms, and so forth, right? So you would think that there's some correlation between the two, that will, as they one increases, so does the other one increase.
Yeah.
And I think that's going into like your discussion on AI. So I, to me, it's like as we kind of move from petabyte amount of data flowing around networks to exabyte, flowing around networks, we're there then at a boundary of where humans can actually really even manage these
Right.
systems, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
you really need AI systems to really automate that
Right.
process. And I
Indeed.
think right, and what you're saying is that level one, level two are being augmented today. It could either be even further than that, like much further than
For
that.
sure. I mean, if
You know?
like you said, I mean, AI. Let's flip it around and say, what is AI doing to the network? Essentially, I mean, AI itself is not per se affecting the network, but what makes AI is data. Without data, there's no AI. AI
Yeah,
the data is the fuel of AI, basically. Right.
yeah,
So, and that data has to move for this is called the three basic things. One is training, which is big moves.
yeah.
Second one is inference, which is model movement. Third is
Hmm.
agentic, which is I call the chaos. The chaos we created before. Now new chaos with agentic AI,
Yeah,
and and the volumes, like you say, are growing exponentially. And there are two reasons for that. One, a lot of data that is in the enterprise, sitting in enterprise, wasn't always moved because it wasn't deemed valuable to move and analyze. Right? You have
mm,
petabytes, petabytes of data in a factory. No one said, let's go move that around to analyze. It just stayed in the factory, right?
yeah,
Now it's, well, maybe we can glean more information out of that. Maybe we can find better ways to tune our factory, as an example. So therefore, let's move that data to a large GPU cluster where we're running a large LM model that's optimized for industrial processes, as an example, right? So that is a massive move, and like you said, those are big petabyte moves,
yeah,
petabytes. What I call, petabytes a new gigabyte of sorts. It's just huge
mm,
change in the size of the number of and size of files that it moves.
yeah,
Now you make that first move. I thought it was a one and done. What I'm learning is that no, these models are tuned multiple times, and sometimes subsets are moved around to other maybe lower cost locations or lower complexity GPU arrays. So there are multiple derivative moves of just the training model. And then you have the inference, which is move the model to where it's going to be used, and they have the agentic. All of those moves are becoming a problem for the enterprise because of the sheer size of the moves,
mm,
right? The networks aren't designed for that. And you might say, well, why am I moving it? Why don't I implement AI where the data is? Well, one, AI GPU clusters are so power hungry that hyperscalers are building new locations. I
mm,
read this interesting stat. Um, Deloitte says that in 2025, there will be $371 billion in capex spent on new AI focused data centers. I mean, it's a staggering amount.
yeah.
And and that's just
Mm.
the data centers, GPUs, and all that, not the
Not the
power plants.
facilities and power. Yeah,
It's huge. So and they're not really where the data is. They're someplace. So this big data movement is a huge problem that needs to be addressed. And we're seeing this from like the customers you're mentioning. Similar scale customers are coming to us and saying, I need to move 40 petabytes. If I
Mm.
do that via truck, it's going to take me a year. Even if I put hard drives on a truck, I need to move it faster. Otherwise, my AI project is stalled. And
Yeah.
my CEO and ELT are telling me, you can't wait that long. You have to start this AI initiative.
Yeah.
So it's a huge. It's like it's the key corporate trying to swallow a pig. It's just not moving fast enough through the network, and that's a huge challenge right now for enterprises.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We were just doing some um, polling of the community,
Hmm.
and it's like it's interesting. So I don't want to kind of share the results because I'm going to present those
You
but
don't want
it's
to reveal early, okay?
I don't want to do an early reveal
Yeah.
to that so but what it basically says is that there's a massive expectation mismatch
Yeah.
about what the value is, and everyone gets the value
Hmm.
versus readiness
Right.
to
Right.
support. Like
Right.
it's a
Well, I can do a
major
reveal.
gap.
We just
You know,
we just had a global survey to 1,200 enterprise customers,
yeah.
and in fact, when we publish it today, that's why I can reveal it.
Hmm.
Um, and just like you said, the expectations versus reality. Well, right now, the thought is only 1 out of 10 AI projects are deemed successful because the expectation was we can start it today, we're going to get results tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, the start is now delayed by months and months,
Yeah.
and the results aren't forthcoming. So people saying I'm writing all these big checks to start these AI projects, but no results yet. So there's this what some what was it, Gardner called the trough of disillusionment coming through
Mm.
from the vast expectations that were created versus the reality. And part of that is, being ready to understand what you want. And part of this is your data ready to be analyzed, and is it at the right place, so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point. We have a session on why only 4% of AI projects succeed. And
Or is it even worse? With ours was 10%. You found like it's 4%. So
yeah, it's like
oh my God, it's getting worse by the minute.
it's interesting. Like Andy Brown is doing that session. It's chock full of consumers who've invested in large AI
Right,
projects, and they've gone through like the ones that failed and also the ones that
mm-hmm.
succeeded. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to give a recipe
Right,
for how do you become in the 4%.
yeah. I
Part of
think
that. But
that's going to be
yeah,
real life lessons learned and shared. So that sounds like that's going to be a fantastic session. Uh,
that's going to be on day two. I think a little bit. No, you're on day one. Yes, that's going to be on day two.
okay, okay.
So then, so I think we probably kind of hit on like some of the challenges like enterprises are facing now, kind of adopting, and I think or adopting, or changing their networks in order to support AI workloads, like at scale. And I think really, maybe it's summed up, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if we need to expand, we'll expand.
Mm.
But it's that gap, right? It's that gap around expectations on, and it's
Right.
that and also their readiness. From the data that I've been seeing is that they're not investing enough. Like the infrastructure. This is a transition that's bigger than the transition from SNA to TCP/IP and
Oh,
local area networks. You
huge,
know,
huge.
and they're not investing in that way. Yet.
That's
So.
I mean, the
Yeah.
other part that sort of people have built over time, and I'm not sure how well it was planned or it was driven out of opportunistic usage, is cloud. Now, clouds are
Mhm.
great. Clouds have a lot of enterprise applications running, and many enterprises have evolved organically to use more than one cloud. I mean, the stats are, practically 89% of the enterprises have a multi-cloud. They may have a primary, a secondary, maybe a tertiary.
Yeah.
And and roughly about half of this seems to be in the cloud, but the other half, and probably the more valuable, interesting part that's more secret, is inside the data center or inside the
Right.
enterprise data. So that says this might be the first time where you have to look at all that data and say, how do I how do I find a way to move them around to the right place? Because before it's been, I have my apps on cloud A. Well, that data stays with cloud A, cloud B, cloud C. I've never had to
Right.
think about rationalizing it, collecting it to different places to analyze it, and then make good, create some outcomes out of it. So it's a new way of new thing that enterprise need to consider. The AI migration projects are running into this. That's one of the reasons that they're not succeeding as quickly. But a part of it is, again, it's a multi-cloud aspect of it, in that we've
Yeah.
benefited from the diversity of capabilities each cloud has. Each cloud has, they're not identical. Some have better footprints, some have better applications, so on and so forth. So there's sprawl in enterprises for cloud usage, but that's not creating a challenge on the network. How do I deal with these large petabyte data files that are now spread across cloud A, cloud B, cloud C, geographic spread, and stuck in my data center that I need to find a way to move out into these big GPU clusters? So it definitely is a challenge, not just from a size perspective, but also the geographic multi-cloud footprint that you have to go deal with.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that because within the community we've been talking about multi-cloud for a long time. Like basically back around like 2016 or so, we started
Mm-hmm.
having these conversations.
Yep.
And so everyone kind of knew it, but there was a lot of inertia for doing
Yep.
multi-cloud because there was a lot of folks who were just saying, "Oh, we're just going to go with AWS,"
Yep.
and lo and behold, the developers had other ideas, right? So they were kind of like
Yeah.
building applications,
Yeah. Yeah.
in these different constructs, that were better for their applications, and so like
Yeah.
all of a sudden they became multi-cloud and they had to start dealing with it. I think with AI though, it's much bigger, and I think I'm so glad you brought up the whole data part of
Yeah.
this, is that the data is spread across all these different solvent domains,
Yeah.
whether those are clouds or within even public public AI, and then also within your own enterprise, and so you need to have access into
Yes.
that. I think also too is that, and we'll see this at this summit, we have Google and also Microsoft and
Mm-hmm.
IBM. They're talking about their kind of multi-cloud interconnects, right? So
Uh-huh.
it's like how like so now even the cloud providers are starting to get into the business of they
Right.
realize that the networking of were accessed into their AI constructs
Mm-hmm.
through networking is a fundamental advantage or
Right.
disadvantage to them. So now they're
Indeed.
starting to like focus on how do we better provide better networking connections and
Right.
networking services in order for our AI applications or workloads to run, because like they're
Right.
after AI workloads, right? That's the
Indeed.
competition, right?
That's a
Between
prize, basically. Right. 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 Now, the
yeah.
interesting thing we're finding, with this, by the way, is uh, just having a fast network is not often enough. And here's why.
Mhm.
So let's think practical. Let's say you have a set of data on, let's just use AWS as an example. Right? We have a lot of object data on S3 buckets. And And again, for the sake of example, let's say you need to move that to Oracle because they sign a deal with OpenAI, and because you keep hearing that. Um, well, if the data is large, you not only need a network, like you said, but you have to be able to pull the data out of storage fast enough and carry it across the network fast enough, such that your AI project's not stalled. So you have to think of a end-to-end. Where are all of the gears in the sand that you have to worry about on data pull, data transfer, data deposit, making sure it's secure, making sure it's easy to understand, and making sure you're not leaving half your wallet on egress charges
Yeah.
on that move. So all of those are, so having fast connect is great. In fact, some telcos are saying, hey, I can put a fiber for your use in 20 days. That's great. But that is just, it's like, here's your bucket of flour, but go make the cake. You need a lot more than to put all that together. So you have to think end to end. What is the problem I'm solving? What is the outcome I seek? The outcome I seek is this bucket of data has to go from here to here.
Mhm.
How do I solve all the pieces without, again, having a rocket scientist degree to assemble the connections and the APIs and secret keys and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
which hurts people's heads, and therefore the projects are delayed.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, basically.
Yeah, it's well, you're right. It's a complicated kind of new space,
Yeah.
Anything you do in multi-cloud becomes complicated. It's like
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Yeah.
it's because you just have these different. They all approach the same thing differently,
Yeah.
and then also all of their whether it's policy or governance, compliance
They're
tools,
all
like even
different.
all of those things, and like their security notifications or network notifications, they're all different. You need
Yeah.
different tooling, for them. So
Yeah.
it just complicates, everything. But that's kind of like where we are. And it was interesting. I was talking to Svi Gal. Svi is like the CTO over at Memorial Sloan
Hmm.
Kettering Cancer Center,
Yeah.
and he was talking about where they have invested in AI, and so like in there, so like they're obviously the kind of the one of the largest cancer centers on the
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah.
So they have kind of a front end, which is like where you interact,
Hmm.
like to make scheduling,
Yeah.
want to meet doctors.
Hmm.
Then
Hmm.
there's the actual they call it the middle part of their business, which is when you're actually interacting with doctors.
Right.
And then there's the back end, which is when you're kind of dealing with healthcare services, insurance,
Hmm.
and payment, so forth.
Huh?
And then kind of adjacent to all of that is the research, kind of the
Right.
cancer research.
Huh?
So his approach was to really kind of look at the workflows in those key different areas, especially on the
Mhm.
first three, on
Yeah.
the front end, the middle, and then also on the back end.
Huh?
And what they found at Memorial, and they have really just some great statistics like on
Yeah.
how they've been able to improve workflow, but it's really to go after the places that are most complex and that drive
Hmm.
a lot of frustration.
Right.
So,
Right.
that's the area where you can apply AI, kind of do
Hmm.
your research, look at, what suppliers can offer you, but go after
Right.
those particular areas.
Yeah.
So we know that that's going to be happening over and over and over again all
Right.
across the economy,
Right.
within all these corporations. And I
Right.
think I'm not sure how much they are. They're actually, I think SFI is a big. I believe they're a Microsoft user.
Mm.
So they do use cloud, services. But I think it's like, in these hybrid and multi-cloud environments,
Mhm.
maybe that's also an area to kind of apply AI, especially around the operations piece of it. Can you
Yeah.
normalize and maybe simplify some of
Like,
those? Um,
like you said, a part of it is applying AI to deal with the variations and complexity of different clouds themselves.
yeah,
Part of it is, one thing that AI doesn't do is, change protocols. So you have to build some maybe call
right.
it glue or normalization logic to make these clouds look more consistent as far as your applications are concerned, because that's when AI becomes more successful in understanding what's going on underneath.
Yeah.
The other interesting pattern here is if you look at um, way back when, we're old enough to remember this. Way back when, before the top four became dominant, there were a lot of other what you could call today cloud providers
Yeah.
because they emerged. I have a data center. I have a bunch of CPUs come and use that, and a lot of those went away because the scale of the top four providers they've just absorbed most of the customers. There's another trend right now on AI clusters again. If I drive on Highway 101 here in Silicon Valley, and for most cities, when you drive on a highway, you see lawyer ads. Here, you see
Yeah.
AI GPU cluster ads on the highway.
Yeah.
Going because you're in Nerdistan, right? So, and there are a lot of them because they
Yeah.
have created their expertise to drive AI specific compute environments, and maybe they have a side deal with NVIDIA, who knows, to sort of get their own GPUs. But they are another interesting twist into the AI game, which is if you really want your app to be processed at the level of scale you need, with the AI expertise you need, come to us because we are the specialist.
Yeah.
Will they be around 5 years from now? Who knows? But they offer an alternative destination for enterprises who say, I want my project to move quickly. I want the expertise. If I go to a normal cloud provider, I have 1,000 things I can do there, but do they have the depth? Versus if I go to one of these providers, I know that's all they do. They focus.
Yeah.
which creates, it's a multi cloud because now you have these specialized clouds that you have to connect into. You have all the complications of being able to connect and use them, but they offer different value that a lot of enterprises seem to be interested in.
Yeah.
So it's getting more complicated than less.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I was actually on the West Coast. I think it was last week. So I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. Drive from like, Santa Clara up to San Francisco on
You
101.
see all
And
the ads on the side. Yep,
yeah, it's good.
that's it.
But like, we're in the industry, so it's kind of hard not to notice,
Uh-huh.
so I'm not sure if
Yeah,
everybody else does, but
yeah.
yeah, no, I can relate, Shalom.
You're late. Yep, yep. That's how it is.
Well,
That's how it is.
so
Yeah.
let's kind of think a little bit, kind of future, right? We've talked about AI and observability and kind of what the changes are happening there. We talked about kind of networking and AI workloads and the kind of changes that we're seeing within infrastructure as well.
Mhm.
The new growth, around hybrid and multi-cloud,
Yep.
and kind of the complexities that's going to be introducing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, why don't we just try to take a look at, kind of go out 5 years, which is always kind of hard to do, but it's always kind of fun to do as well. And then think about, okay, well, how autonomous, our networks. And when I'm thinking autonomous, like our
Mm-hmm.
networks are pretty, for the movement of traffic around, once they're configured, they're pretty autonomous, right? We
They're
don't really
pretty
change them,
right, right, right. But they're
right?
sort of also static in some sense, right? I mean, you set them up, they run, but you don't change them too often. So today,
That's very true.
yeah,
Yeah, that's very
yeah,
true.
yeah,
So I think there's kind of the traffic itself, but then there's the operations. And I
yep.
think the operations is really, where we have autonomy going on. So if you thought about like what do you think the industry looks like in the 2030 timeframe, which wasn't that far away, it's only 5 years
No,
away.
not. So as I was thinking about this conversation we're going to have, when we when we had the first ONUG event in New York, it was about SD-WAN. Remember back then, right?
Yes.
SD-WAN was
Yeah.
emerging new scale, new activity, and SD-WAN's promise was somewhat simplification of the network because it's software defined, so therefore it implied simplification. And it came to a point now; it's sort of rather mature. In fact, it sort of has it's sort of become a rather just checkbox item service at the moment. When we look forward, I think a similar concept, whatever the Gartners of the world will call it, a similar concept has to emerge. I like the term that you created, the data fabric, something
Mhm.
along those lines, autonomous data fabric or intelligence, something along those lines as a concept definitely has to emerge because I think it's not just the fact that it's the operational intelligence, but it's the more dynamic aspect of this new environment. And I think agentic is the one that's going to prompt this need for dynamic because agentic is, on one hand, it's really exciting because you can see how it really is really using AI for creating practical outcomes,
Yeah.
getting work done. It's not just fancy chat back and forth, it's getting work done. But at the same time, agentic AI, as it's being developed, is very unpredictable. You're not just tapping one set of APIs, you could be tapping 50 different APIs around the world, right?
Yeah.
So, how the network responds to it, how you observe what's going on, how you manage security, it's going to create a new level of dynamic that I'm not sure a static network config with observability on top is going to be sufficient for. So don't know how chaotic it's going to be, but we can even see now, companies emerging for, hey, how do you manage your fleet of agentic AIs and how do you register them, so on and so forth. And it's going to be thousands of these agents running around. Besides the governance part of it, which is a whole different story, the network itself it has to deal with new flows because the
Yeah.
classic flows were app to user, which is what SD-WAN did, and
Hmm.
then now app to app and somewhat multi-cloud networking. But it's apps to apps, apps to hundreds of APIs that are at various logical distances, physical distances, so on and so forth. So that is, I think, the cause of the chaos, the driver of the
Yeah.
chaos, right? How do you deal with it? You need a new level of, call it maybe AI operational sense of on top of the network.
Mm.
And the networking products themselves have to be more dynamic of their own. I mean, for example, this whole license model of, hey, pay for a year of fixed capacity. Well, that's going to go
Yeah.
out the window.
Yeah.
You have to pay for consumption, pay for dynamic flexing up and down of capacity, and be able to move the capacity around as needed. So the autonomy means the underlying system has more control of its own and be able to move, change things itself, rather than fix it and then just observe what's going on.
Yeah.
So that's a level of new dynamic that I think is going to come up, driven again with things such as agentic AI, with the underlying networking products having to change and get out of this fixed mindset of being dynamic themselves. And that's a big change because networking industry is used to, I have my little thing, it goes at X speed, Y speed, Z speed, and I'm fixed, I'm done. Just see what's going on and change the priorities. Well, it has to be, I think, more autonomous and more intelligent than that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Those are all such great points. It's almost like we're embarking on building kind of an AI native kind of network fabric,
Yeah,
right? And that fabric is really mostly it is like an exchange. It's like
right.
moving data from, whether that's from users to applications or from agents to agents, agents to tools, agents, to like data sets.
Mm-hmm.
It is really providing that level of kind of exchange,
Right.
and it's not we've moved so far beyond around connecting computers to together or connecting buildings together, but really I think it's all about really kind of connecting data and these silos that we've kind of built because they were needed at the time,
Mm-hmm.
like data center and branch office and campus and outposts and so forth,
Right.
with their own kind of uniqueness, of attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of the more I kind of look at this, the more I just think that just becomes a fabric, just part of the
Yeah.
overall fabric, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter kind of where it is, it needs kind of like it's still always going to need like level one, level two,
Of course.
kind of bandwidth services, but I think to your point, what we've built, God, you look at MPLS, as an
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
it's like a very static,
Yeah.
kind of wide area networking, and it does some amount of congestion management, congestion
Mm-hmm.
control. But I think it would be interesting if the TCP/IP window, for us to kind of be dealing with congestion,
Yeah.
if now networks start moving so much faster than that window can accommodate, where we
Challenge.
really have to like have a much more broader view of
Right.
state information, and then it's really the AI that is opening paths and closing down paths and
Indeed.
making that a much more dynamic. Is
Yeah,
that
I mean that has to happen, and I mean, at the end and the bottom, you still have some fixed resources. You have a physical fiber. You can't keep changing that every day. You have to,
yeah.
but how you manage that in a more dynamic way, that has to change. It's too static at the moment, and and as we build these again, going back to simplicity, we cannot make it too complicated. It's got to be in fact further simplified because you have too many layers to go manage that just won't be practical from a human operator perspective. So we have to have the intelligent management of that data fabric, and then in a way that makes it made that simple for the app developer to go run it and then go deal with it. I mean, the early sign of this that I'm seeing with some of our customers is they are at least in this call it evolution phase of we have today, we're trying to figure out what tomorrow is, but what do I do in the meantime to manage my business?
Yeah.
They're actually building separate networks for their data traffic. So they have the user traffic, called the internal apps, your email, your PowerPoint, et cetera. But they're realizing that the needs of that part of their network is vastly different than the new needs of big data movement, for AI purposes, for machine learning purposes, so on and so forth. So first time I heard about we're building a separate network. I mean, that was, so many years ago we had to go do that because of the more for security reasons. Now it's more for performance reasons again.
Yeah.
And they're willing to invest the money to put completely parallel but different scale networks for just the big different flows of data on their infrastructure side, on their business, rather than the user side.
Yeah.
And so we'll see where that goes, but it's a new trend.
That's interesting because
Yeah,
we've been there before, right? It's like we used to always have multiple different networks,
that's right.
physically separate networks, to support different use cases, like whether those were going
Then
pretty far
MPLS came on,
back.
so you can ride one network, and now we're tearing it up again.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right. It's like, Sean, you were here just as long as I was. It's like
Yeah,
we had terminal networks, and those were just for like,
you
connecting
got it. Got it.
3270s and like
Yeah.
terminals and ASCII terminals, and we had a kind of separate
That's a
TCP/IP kind of
voice
Ethernet.
network, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, so it's like we had all these separate networks, and that's really what made Cisco what it is today.
that's
It's like kind of combine them all into a multi-protocol,
right.
network. But
Yeah, yeah.
that's interesting to see if we see that kind of like now breaking apart.
I don't know what's a trend or not, but I've just seen enough data points from some of our larger customers that are calling the tech space that where they're generating so much data and they want
Yeah,
to make use of it. So we'll see whether it becomes a trend or if it's only for these high end customers that are doing it. But that was an interesting change, or whether it's a temporary move or not. But yeah, a few years from now, I would say one, you know, what do we call it, SD fabric or AI fabric. There's going to be a new way of running these networks at massive scale.
yeah,
I do think that some of the things that we are using heavily today, like SD-WAN, is going to disappear, or they're going to be, just like any other tech, is going to be just buried under a pile of other stuff that you deal with.
right.
Um, I do think that the security aspects need to be bolstered because, like you said, when the more diverse an environment you go into, multiple cloud data centers, people again they never forget about security, but they may not be applying the topmost level of security,
Mm.
and that I mean you learn a very painful lesson. One day someone hits you and you realize that your very important assets have gone, and the difference here is unlike call it the recent past with AI, people are bringing their data that never saw the light of day out. Imagine your factory production data that just stayed in the factory before, right? Now it's being moved out, so now hackers are having a feeling, oh my God, there's more we can take a look at. Hey, now this data will let us go and mess with the power production plant because we have now we have better insights into what's happening inside the power plant.
Yeah,
So security in this more complicated world has to be bolstered, not put on the wayside, and you have to deal with the multi-vendor, multi-cloud aspect of security that is still a challenge today.
for sure. My God,
Yeah,
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 definitely a challenge. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think, and the other piece on this, if I think to 2030,
Mm,
it's got to be the operations, kind of a network operations center and a security
mm,
operations center turned into an agentic operations center. All right. And where we have swarms of agents that are fully distributed, throughout the infrastructure
right.
where we're not haystacking anymore. We're not kind of sending everything to some centralized location, all the alerts and alarms and so forth, but actually the agents are close to the data. But I think on the people side of it, now we're kind of like, I would think on the people side, we get people out of the incident response part of the interaction part of the operations. And people are really around kind of policy, guardrails, exceptions, governance. That's really kind of like what, how we're managing this infrastructure. So it becomes very automated if the trajectories continue the way that they are.
I would agree. So my only human concern is when do we teach people how things work underneath? Because if they're only working on policy, and when something happens, when the AIs go berserk or they turn off, you still need humans to go and roll up their sleeves and go make things happen. So you almost need to have a instead of people that have to do the work and have to be that level one person or the expert that hits that CLI. Otherwise, we're forgetting so much that
Yeah.
inevitably, once some storm happens and things go haywire, we still need people with that expertise. So I
Yeah.
would
I
I
think
would bet on that, on contingency training for people.
I totally agree with you on that. I think it's the people who are going to be there have to have deep domain
Yeah,
expertise and knowledge, and that's
yeah,
not just like within network operations. That's for
right,
any domain, whether you're running a business, and
right.
your business is relying upon this AI application. You
Mhm.
still need to have great domain
Yeah,
experience because you're the one who's telling the AI what to do,
right,
right?
right.
And so yeah, so I totally agree
Yeah,
agree with that.
yeah, yeah. The human factor is as important to deal with. So
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
All right.
right.
Well, Shalon, this has been really, really great. Love chatting with you. That was actually love finishing it also on the vision of kind of like where we're going in the industry in 2030.
Nick, I really enjoyed it as well. I look forward to the meeting you live again in New York City.
Yeah.
It looks like it'll be a very fun event, and event where we're going to learn a lot more about what our peers are doing. So I'm looking forward to it, and thank you for the opportunity to chat, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Shalon. Yeah, we're all going to learn a lot. This is going to be really great 2 days.
Indeed.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank
take
you,
care.
everyone. Thanks, Shalon.
Take care. Bye bye.